I've covered a lot of different cybersecurity options on this show. Zero Trust, SASE, cloud security. That's just to name a recent few. Security is always dynamic and ever-changing. Yet there are still essential technologies and practices that must be in place for anybody wanting true efficacy from their security stack. For instance, Identity Access Management, or IAM, a non-negotiable prerequisite that's easy to say, or at least the words are, not the acronym, perhaps a bit harder to do, or not. You may already know or have what is needed for a good IAM program. In fact, program may be that missing link, that next big step that you need to take. It's not something to take lightly. A substandard approach to IAM will cause negative ripples through the rest of your security stack. Guaranteed. Well, in the study titled Security Priorities for 2023, Worldwide Technology highlighted 6 areas: data, ransomware, Zero Trust Framework, Identity and Access Management, Security Access Service Edge, or SASE, as well as SSE, and then risk mitigation across heterogeneous environments. Today's show on identity features my conversation with industry expert Jayson Yee.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Jayson talks about the importance of being deliberate, about aligning efforts to business goals, and the importance of knowing where IAM begins as well as where it ends, especially as it relates to other important security functions that will often overlap and cause confusion, especially when talking to vendors about things like Zero Trust. I mean, do your eyes glaze over with formal-sounding acronyms like IGA, AM, and PAM? Well, that's Identity, Governance, Administration, Access Management, as well as Privileged Account Management, which all may sound complex if you're not familiar with them, but Jayson illustrates how you're probably doing a lot of these recommended practices already, but next steps may include how it can all work together to simplify your workload, reduce your risk, and perhaps score some quick business wins. There is so much value in today's show. I'm so glad you could join us. Welcome to Tech 37, your home for technology, education, and collaboration. My name is Rob Boyd. So let me ask you, as I understand it, I don't think you've been at Worldwide very long, but you're not certainly new to this space that we're speaking to. I wonder if you could tell me how long you've been at Worldwide. What are you responsible for now? And how does that make sense that they would want you there based on your previous experience?
Sure. So it's mid-February now, and I guess I've been here about 6 weeks. And my role is to really give an IAM presence to WWT and to show the rest of the market that WWT is serious about its IAM program. So my responsibilities are under enablement, the channel representation with our vendors and other professional services partners. But really what my primary goal is here is to build robust IAM programs for our client base, to have them take a programmatic look at their IAM initiative.
So this show, as you know, but also for our audience, this is an extension of the Security Priorities Report for 2023. And priority number 4 was talking about IAM, as you mentioned, Identity and Access Management. What's important to understand about what it is, especially with your experience? What do people sometimes misunderstand?
IAM is 2 things. It's identity and it's access management. So identity is really just proving that the user is who they say they are. We just want to make sure that we've got a consistent identity tied to that user. And the access management piece is now talking about where they're supposed to have access to, what fits in their job duties, what is just enough access to get the job done, no more, certainly not less.
We're talking about a framework, not a product or a technology here, correct?
Yes, there's plenty of product and technology, but the framework is that program. Okay. It's really a matter of being deliberate with your IAM mindset. All this has to make business sense. And one of the great things about IAM is that we can go through, and while we're making things make sense, we get to improve some user experience. And the mindset, once it turns into execution, it can be disruptive, but it can also have a large bit of enablement attached to it.
Well, so it's going to look different for everybody. And especially I would imagine that like all security, certain industries, especially the heavily regulated ones, are usually more advanced because they've been forced to earlier on in these situations. But why is IAM important?
The focus of security is kind of shifted back towards the identity and the access management with it, really. So it's kind of the perimeter would be the castle, where IAM is more like the suit of armor, right? You want to make sure that you're focusing on that person, because what are they after? They're after data. What we're looking for there, and at the root of that, is to see if this identity is doing something differently than it normally does, to maybe send a flag or show us that, hey, this identity may not be who we think it is. No longer is this person who they say they are. Now we're questioning identity. And so this is where we go through when we have another tenet of zero trust, which is continuous identification, right? So we're going to say, all right, you need to show us again that you are who you say you are.
What is the state of identity and access management? Is this something that is just now striking people that's important, or they've got baby steps into it, and so they've got stuff they can leverage to build upon, but they haven't thought about it programmatically? Are there any identifiable trends that are important to understand here?
It's really just about taking your normal business practices and facilitating them, right? It's really, these are things that
means you have to know what your business practices are, because I always think.
Yeah. So with your focus, and you're dead on it. You have to define it. So say when somebody comes on, or you hire somebody and you're giving them access, right? Everybody gets email, right? Everybody gets
certain base level of things. Yeah.
That's something you would provision manually, right? You would say, okay, I got to put them in whatever group, and they're going to get the software. I'm going to send it out to them. What IAM allows you to do is to really operationalize those workflows, take all your policies and all your practices and first log them and help you create them if they don't exist. Our intent is to go through and make sure that you have good policies, that the technology helps you with what you're already doing and makes it better.
What kind of things are important for someone getting started?
The very first thing is to understand why it's important now. You've been in business, you've been doing this presumably for a while. Well, what's my motivation? Did I get audited, and do I have a finding against me? Hey, oh geez, I gotta find a solution for this and get out of the.
That's a fire burning. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. By understanding why it's important now helps you communicate where you are. For instance, zero trust.
Yeah.
IAM's a big piece of zero trust. It's not all of zero trust, but it's definitely controls. It has some controls in it that will satisfy some of the tenets of that. Don't expect IAM to solve zero trust. You're going to need network segmentation. You're going to need other controls in here too. And it's just
so it's an element. Yeah.
Yeah. Any vendor that says they check off zero trust, definitely call your consultant and ask them how they do it, right? Because they're only solving a piece of it. No one's taking care of all of it.
Well, and zero trust is a different priority in this particular report as well.
And that's illustrating the reason, why you need to define why it's important to you now. So you don't get stuck in a zero trust rabbit hole or another rabbit hole similar to that, right? Find out what's important to you. Are you onboarding a lot of folks? There's a lot of turnover, a lot of time being spent there. Are there errors being made? In many cases, we can go through and say, hey, this can be solved with the things you already have in-house, or here's how you can add things to what you've already got. So when I think about the IAM program, it's kind of like making dinner. Let's look at what you got to begin with and say, okay, yeah, we can use this, but hey, this is expired.
What you're saying there's a little bit of a tools rationalization that says part of a good beginning to a program, but then you're saying that there are going to be in many situations, people already have some tools that could play a part or may already be playing some part, even if you don't have a programmatic framework wrapped around it.
Yeah, the user directory is a key piece. Everybody's got a user directory. We use that as a source of truth in some cases to determine who's going where. We put them in a specific bucket in our user directory, and then everybody in that directory gets access to wherever. Right? So that's a key piece of it. And most organizations do have some IAM technology. The big thing is that IAM covers a lot of ground. What a lot of folks want to do is they start with a very, very large scope, right? And I like to take the approach of making sure you have your fundamentals in house and covered, and those are the identity and governance, identity and governance
That
administration.
sounds important. Fundamentals. All right.
Yeah, identity, governance, and administration,
Okay.
and the access management, and then the privilege account management, and those are shortened IGA. Access management, AM, and PAM. Those are common terms you'll probably hear if you're talking about it. Really, what I find with those three features of IAM is something that people are already doing anyway. It's the governance, saying, okay, who's supposed to have access to what? The access management, okay, I'll either manually provision this and put it in so these people can get access to the resources they need. And then the privilege stuff is when you're talking about sensitive access, things that not everybody needs. You just go through and you provision them based off of what kind of role that they have. So You're already doing that as an organization. Now, also included is the data pieces, right? The data management. Not every organization is looking at their data. Ticketing systems. Not every organization even has a ticketing system to request additional access and whatnot. But those are still really common pieces of an IAM program. But by focusing on these three features here and really using a strategy, an IAM strategy to bind that all together, we can get to all that other technology and really design this around what a client really needs. But really, we find that there's a lot of technical debt that you need to cover with those three spots. So for instance, if we're going to go through and we want to make sure that we have the right access, well, we got to make sure that our Active Directory or our LDAP structure looks solid.
What would be an example of a bad Active Directory setup?
So when we think about the LDAP structure, and when I say not necessarily bad, but is it really tuned? Is it ready to go? We see this a lot in healthcare when the bigger entity absorbs a smaller entity, right? And that smaller entity, they have their own LDAP structure. So they're not like you can merge them together. So now take that, and that healthcare organization has been doing this over several years, and they've gobbled 6, 7, 8 different smaller entities. So if we're going to now put in governance to that, what are we governing? Which one of these are we going to pick? So now we got to figure out a way to either consolidate or clean up these directories. And there's tools to do that.
In the priority report, there are 6 steps for putting this stuff into action. The first one was talking about strengthen the core pillars of your IAM program, and it's really about discovery and understanding your the kind of questions that were outlined in there. Are your processes clearly defined and documented? Are they consistent across the enterprise? Are they creating identity problems? Review and inspect identity sources. What does that mean to you?
So were we just talking about the identity sources, mergers? So we have all those different identity. All those are identity sources. We can even have a third-party identity source, but you really got to make sure that you can consider that a source of truth. That you can. It's got to be in a shape to where
there's some trust in that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There has to be a good.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So once you identify that, you don't really identify. You got to build it. So and you take it from things that you've already got. And once you've got that tuned and you can trust it, it's now your source of truth. And now you can trust the feed that goes into it, or you get to a point to where you can manage it effectively and get it to go downstream effectively, or right back to the directories with your other processes.
Does it, in terms of tracking devices or headless non-people, are they tracked in the same type of database and such in these scenarios, or is that a completely different? Because it feels like it's one and the same, but also going to be different. Yeah.
So you're exactly, everything you said there is accurate. So when it comes to something like a headless device or a machine to machine, it's still an identity. It doesn't have a heartbeat, but it's still important, and you can really do some harm with those devices if they go rogue or somebody compromises one. So it's still very important in IAM. And that takes us outside of those initial 3 core offerings, IGA, PAM, and access management. However, there are ways for us to control that. That's primarily through technology, right? Because it's machine to machine. You got to have
all automated.
Take a look at that and keep an eye on it. But when it comes to that, it's still very important for us to control that and get, and more importantly, have the visibility over it to make sure it's doing what we think it's doing.
Well, this is good confirmation that what you're providing is good, because as I look at this list from the security report you've already covered, again, more of this kind of stuff. One of the things that it mentions on that identity sources, but it talks about being able, removing orphaned accounts and out-of-date identities and things like this. That seems like, as a species, we're very good at adding things. I think we're less good at pruning. But how laborious is that type of thing with a good IAM program? Is that type of thing easy, automatable?
Yeah, and what you're talking about is a key tenet of identity governance administration. The IGA section, one of the primary drivers for people to obtain an IGA platform is to cover that. We call that the certification of access or attestation. So what that we do with that process, and it takes some time to set it up, but once it's set up, that becomes largely it rolls right into your work stream to where every quarter or every whatever period or window that you need to satisfy and review, say it's something you're supposed to look at once a year, it'll kick off a campaign like 8 months into it and say, hey, you need to certify that the access is correct for these people. We've identified you as an account owner or somebody that's responsible for the coverage to make sure that this is accurate. And that comes down into an email. And then you look at it and say, okay, all these people make sense, or I don't have that group anymore. And I say, no, it's not me. And then when you say it's not me, it finds who that belongs to, or it sends a note back and you can say, look, we don't know who's controlling this, but somebody needs to go find it. So that's important.
Or there's going to be an automatic archiving or something because that was always the way when I used to manage phone systems, the best way to find, back in the day when we had to wire, literally it was a pair of copper wires that go to a specific location. If you didn't know where it went in your patch bay, it was yank them out and then wait till someone to complain.
Right. So let me give you a little example here. So I've been in security over 20 years. I know I just started here at WWT 6 weeks ago. So say I found my mirror that stayed at WWT. It's been here 10, 15 years, right? And it's had several different jobs at WWT and then hires me and they say, hey, give Jayson access to his manager. They just
the Bob thing. Yeah.
Right. So now I've got 15 years of access that I don't need to do my job that just came up in 2023. Right. So
which is dangerous for a couple of reasons. Right? It's not the principle of least privilege. You don't need all that. But it's also about mistakes that we make.
Right. And so what happens, like the very first time, doesn't matter how long somebody's been here, if somebody runs that certification campaign and says, hey, does Jayson's boss still need all this access? No, get rid of it. So then now when I come on, even if they do make me look like my boss for access, it's correct now. It's more correct, I should say. So
we should never be copying one person's saying, hey, this role is defined as such. I'm just going to simply copy it over from the last person over to the new guy and then be done with it. That's a recipe for disaster, and that's just sloppy administration, yeah? Yeah,
but sometimes operationally, it's what they need to do. There's no way around it. Like you have that security. Like the best security is just to unplug everything, right? Hey, you're perfectly secure, but can't do anything.
There goes productivity. Yeah.
Right. So then just getting to the operations component of it, sometimes it just needs to happen that way. Not that we endorse it. Generally, we want to fix it, but it could be an enormous lift to go and do that.
Fair. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing with the role-based access control, like hey, here's your role, is that it looks great on paper. But, at the beginning when I told you about all the things I was responsible for, like I am reaching into very many different organizations and there's not going to be another one of me that needs my exact access. It's really entitlements and attributes and whatnot. And that's what a good platform can provide for you. You take some time to set it up, but when somebody like me comes back in or one of my reports, they're going to know not to give my report the exact access, but something very similar to it. And that's just because we've put all the logic and all the policy creation up ahead of time. So when they do come on board or anybody else comes on board, they get the appropriate access. And that's what we're trying to do with identity and access management.
Okay. And this may be dumb because I just haven't been this deep into it. Do we now build access from, it feels like it used to be, we'd say, here's all the access you could possibly have. Let me start trimming it back versus you have no access. Let me just add exactly what you need and only what you need. That's how we're doing it now, right? We're building up from nothing each time, theoretically?
We start from a common platform. Like we know that every user at the company gets this, or most of them get this.
Okay, so like your email example, yeah,
Right.
that kind of
Yes.
access.
So,
but it's additive as opposed to subtracting off of the world is your oyster. And let me just tell you what you can't do. I'm going to tell you what you can do, because it's always easier and better, I would think, to add access than to have to realize that something was added too much.
So when you join an organization, and I'm just realizing this now, it's very much what your example when you say, hey, just pull the copper wire out, and if somebody calls you back with an issue, then like you can go back and fix it, right? You can go and figure out what, okay, we know where that goes. Well, when I was newly hired, there were a couple things at WWT that I needed access to, and I didn't have it, so I had to call somebody, or I had to go through a ticketing ticketing source to go through and get the appropriate access. Organizations aren't putting resources out there to determine who's supposed to have what access, to determine the appropriate access. Like, very few companies are doing that. Now, if you think about the size of Cisco, size of WWT, right? Now, what's happening there, if they don't have somebody doing that or looking at it, or a tool to manage that, then they're going to get inundated. Service desk is going to get all these calls, or the
that makes sense. Yeah,
address that. So again, that's one of our focuses too. What IAM does is helps the enterprises really scale and get to these things faster, and eliminate this waste of time, the waste of effort and whatnot, and kind of reduce that. And then what that translates into is actual dollars, right? You have people that now are able to do their other jobs. You're not hiring contractors to do it. You're not hiring more folks to get out and do things because of this administrative task that just consuming time. Like there was
automate the repetitive stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There was a client that we saved 5,000 man hours just in the certification of access. And you think 2,000 hours roughly for a full-time employee, that got reduced to, 2 hours a week for all of that. And then what that allowed those three full-time employees that they had, allowed them to get back to their other jobs, which are starting to stack up and either get behind on.
So as we're wrapping up, again, just to make sure that we've got the structure here, the third item in terms of steps for putting this into action was leveraging existing tooling to improve the basic tenets of your IAM program. You've already mentioned that. Number 4 was review any gaps discovered in steps 1 through 3. Okay, that's good, because it was all discovery, and it was, here's my data, here are my tools, how are these things interacting with each other? So that makes sense. Tell me about software as a service in the IAM space.
Yeah, so we started off like everything. On-prem was king, right? Before we started realizing that we could leverage things out in the cloud. Yeah, SaaS is fast growing in the market. There's a lot of demand for it, just like any other tool set or platform. People want to be able to use SaaS-based stuff. They want to reduce their footprint, use somebody else for cost savings, just redundancy, maintenance, all that stuff. All the reasons you would generally go to a SaaS-based solution. The same things apply to IAM. Now, these are the most sensitive credentials we could possibly have in an organization, and it takes a level of trust to decide to put that into a SaaS platform. So you got to show us that if we lose our connectivity, we don't lose access to everything. So that's important, and it's there. But you're still going to run into organizations that don't want to do that or cannot take even that 5/9 risk, that 0.01. They cannot take that. Power companies, like, they're going to want something on-prem. There is an enormous push for SaaS and IAM.
The final thing I was going to say on this one was the notion that simplify and improve the user experience, which you also had talked about in the beginning in terms of, in my mind, I think of it as frictionless. At security, we're always trying to say, how do we stay out of the way? And ideally, we want to get people identified, authenticated, and then kind of just lay in the background. And ideally, they'll never encounter us, a security mechanism getting in their way.
Yeah, that's the nirvana state. It goes right along with the customer experience and improving that along the way. I would not call it frictionless. I would call it friction reduced.
Okay, nice. I know. I like that. Okay.
Because you're gonna go into in the case of accessing different systems, if you have your SSO panel, before you just went straight to it, and in many ways it makes it better. But now your SSO panel has a series of images like icons that you can click to get to those resources. And what the SSO can do is act as a force multiplier for MFA. And then now you take that one MFA challenge in session, and like now you're not using the MFA for that access or for everything that you might need to reach in a day. 6 to 12 different applications might require an MFA challenge. Tie it all behind your SSO platform, and it just bottles up and it turns into one session that you sign on and then go to your window expires, and then that just gets better for you. But there's still a bit where you now have to go to your SSO portal. But now, there's also some trade-off with that too. And the user experience benefit there is not just that MFA multiplication, but now say I'm still a new employee. I still have to remember like where all these new sites are, like for my HR, financial stuff, all that, travel expenses. I got to find out where all that is. But if we can use that SSO to park it in one spot, just remember this. And then the great thing about it is like it's all right in front of you. New employees, you don't have to. All you have to remember is like, oh yeah, this is my HR platform. I remember that from my onboarding. Now I don't have to remember the website or which of the dozens of different documents that I took in. That I go pull out that web address and that URL. The benefit to that is it can stay. If that URL ever changes, it just changes the administrator on the SSO. They just go through the update. So you never have to remember that. And the other part about that is as we add more applications to that MFA or that SSO platform, it gets better for the users, right? So now you've taken something else out. Now I don't have to remember where that is, and it's still in my central location. So that's the trade-off. And again, it's a little friction, but it makes a lot of the other things go away.
It's so funny. I love that you called me out on that because I very much have the marketing brain. And I'm pretty sure it was a Cisco conference last week where I got the word frictionless in my head. Yeah.
Well, I'm a services guy, and I've had to answer the frictionless piece.
So you've been burned by that before. Yeah. The whole overpromise and underdeliver. Yeah. Watch out for that.
Oh. Yeah. Let me go find the field team for that. I'm responsible for that comment.
Well, Jayson, as we run out of time here, final thoughts, anything that you want to make sure we leave with?
Find a reliable advisor, consultant to help you out. We have these conversations all the time. You don't need to know this. We're going to meet you where you are and help you develop your program. Really consider a programmatic view to what your needs are. Establish your baseline of why it's important today. We'll help you even figure out some of the goals that you should look for. You're going to have some long-term goals already, but we can also tell you what else to look for, what can be facilitated, or what maybe you're not seeing right now from our experience. So find a partner to come take a look at this. They're great folks that we can tackle this at different levels wherever you are. Maybe you just need a tool, that's fine. Maybe you need to look into building your IAM program. You have no idea what you do with all your IAM tools or even what you need to budget for. We can help you put together a programmatic roadmap that we build together with our client base and say, hey, there's no surprises here. It's coming. Here's your roadmap for the next 2-3 years. If anybody asks you any IAM question, you show them this thing and you highlight whatever you need to talk about that they ask a question about, and you're ready to go. So it's all bundled up, packaged, and ready to go. And that'll last you for the next 2 to 3 years.
Perfect. Well, Jayson, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you. It's been great.
As you can see, most organizations already have the essential elements needed to lay out a strong identity and access management foundation. And it is a foundation. But if you've ever cooked a meal, having all the ingredients is only the first part. It's all in how you bring them together. That's where the art happens. Well, this call for identity and access management comes from the WWT report Security Priorities for 2023. We're going to continue to cover the details found in all of the amazing research that WWT shares on the platform, but I do encourage you to review the full report for yourself. Because these technologies and these practices, they're never going to grow and blossom in a vacuum. They all have to work together. And WWT offers a wealth of resources with more people just like Jayson, plus a deep bench of expertise spanning all the other technologies that you may want a little guidance on optimizing. My name is Rob Boyd. Thank you for watching Tech 37.